hello! I wanted to see how much I've improved since my first video, which was Archmage V1, and what better way to see that than to make an updated version 2 that's hopefully a lot cleaner and stylistically better than the first one, and as per request, I also included solo rules in this one. And hopefully you have considered subscribing to my channel as well as followed me on my brand new Instagram to know exactly when these tutorials are dropping. Okay, the setup. A big ruined city tile gets placed right in the middle, and you have 3 kinds of tiles. The first one here are wilderness tiles. One set of them means you have 5 separate tiles, and you're going to grab 3 sets of them for 2 players, so 15 tiles total. Now for 3 players, it will be 5 sets, and for 4 players, take 6 sets. Since we're doing a 2-player setup, go ahead and shuffle the 3 sets and then put them on the board in this specific pattern. Now the second kind of tiles are outpost locations made up of 3 camps and 3 hybrid races. Shuffle these and place them in the highlighted spots here. And the last kind of tiles are town tiles, which you'll take 3 of for 2 players, 4 towns for 3 players, and 6 towns for 4 players. So here's the final layout of the map for a 2-player game. If you're adding a friend, here's a 3-player map. And if you're adding 2 more friends for a 4-player game, here you go. You're welcome. Happy Thanksgiving. Now for player setup, everyone picks 1 of 4 colors and gets 15 followers, and the remaining 10 go to the supply. You get 1 mage tower, a mage figure, 6 relic cubes in 1 of each color, and the same with the 6 planet tokens. I actually find it easier to just put all these in a bag so that next time someone could just be like, oh, I want to be blue, and everything they need is one nice spot. Now each player also needs their own tower board, a spellbook mantle placed to the right of their tower board, 18 spells that match the color of the mages, just make sure you take out the warlord cards first, and these are placed face down to the left of their tower board, and finally a player aid tile. Okay, now with these circle planet tokens, these keep track of the rounds in the game. So randomly place a planet into their own spot on the top of the board, and if you're playing with less than 4 players though, you have to make some slight adjustments. So for 3 players, move any planet you want away from the middle space, and for 2 players, move 2 planets of your choice. And then you match the relic cubes with what you placed for your planet. That means that for yellow, which is at a number 1 spot for a planet, gets a relic cube at 1 for matter. The green planet at 2 gets 2 for nature, and purple gets 2 for time, and so forth. Now in total, each player should have everything shown here. So how do we play? Now the goal here is to become the strongest mage, and you do so by gaining the most victory points by having the strongest spells and by controlling most of the land. Now to do this, you have 5 movement points to spend on your turn, and there are 3 ways to spend them. This phase that we're going to go over is called phase 2, the journey phase, and the first action you can perform is to travel. So you can move to any adjacent location at the cost of 1 movement point, but there are a few rules. 1, you can't enter a location if another player's mage or their mage tower is on it already. 2, if there is a spell token on the location, you have to resolve it before doing anything else. And 3, if you decide to go through a cursed tower, say goodbye to one of your followers from your company. Okay, so traveling is one action you can perform with your movement points. The second one is to explore. So if you go to a face down location, it takes 1 point to flip it face up, and then you can get a 1-time exploration bonus. Flipping over a wilderness tile means you instantly gain 1 relic of that type by moving the relic to a higher number. Opening a camp, indicated by this symbol, means that you gain a follower from the reserve of 10 added to your 15 base followers. And the special hybrid races will have a ×1 symbol. All this means that you can trade in 2 relics to train your apprentice. Okay, we can travel, we can explore, and the third possible action you can spend movement points on is attacking. Now to attack, you have to be on the same location as an enemy follower. If there's a war token, the wooden one here is an upgrade for the collector's edition, by the way, then you can spend a movement point to remove it first before targeting the enemy follower. And then once it's empty of wards, you can spend 1 movement point to kill the follower who gets returned to the supply, not back to the player's company. Now after, you and your player that you attacked both gain a blood relic. So traveling, exploring, and attacking are 3 ways to spend your movement points, but remember how I said 1 way to win is to control the land? Well, this is done by deploying followers, which actually doesn't cost any movement points at all. So if you're on a wilderness, town, or camp that's already explored and unoccupied by other followers, you can take 1 follower from your company and place it on that tile that you're on. You don't always have to deploy a follower if you don't want to, and remember you can always move through locations with other followers and not attack them. But like attacking other followers is like attacking friendships, so why wouldn't you? Just kidding. Anyways, after everyone took a turn and spent their 5 movement points, we finished the journey phase and enter phase 3, which is the journey's end phase. Now, depending on which tile your mage ended on, there are 6 possibilities. If you're at a town, you can gather, meaning for every wilderness location you control, including the one that your mage tower's on, you gain that type of relic. So if I have 2 followers on a crypt, a mage tower in a library, and another follower on a mine, then I gain 1 relic in time, 2 in death, and 1 in will. If you also control camps, you get to add a follower from the supply and add it to your company. And if you control towns, they can do both. So you can pick any relic you want, or you can gain a follower from the supply to your company, but your choice can be made separately for each town. So let's say that I have 2 towns. I gain 1 follower for this town and another follower for that town. Or I can gain a yellow relic for one and a green relic for the other. Or I can gain a time relic for one and a follower for the other. Okay, so that's if your mage ends at a town. If you end at a camp, you can actually recruit up to 3 more followers from the supply to your company. If you end on a race, either in the center or on one of the hybrid races, you can initiate an apprentice. This is how initiating works. You give up 2 of the required relics, like if you're on the Dryads, you give up 2 nature relics. In exchange, you get to place a follower on the corresponding spell, which in this case are the nature spells, and they're now considered an apprentice instead of a follower. So for any of the 6 mythic races, you can initiate up to 3 times, but for the hybrid races, you can only initiate once per spell tree. So like for the trolls, who are hybrid of the Dryads and Dwarves, you can only initiate once in nature spells and once in will. Now after you initiate an apprentice, you can add a corresponding spell to your spellbook, but just place it face down until your next turn. More on that too in a second. So gathering in the town, recruiting in a camp, initiating in one of the races. The 4th possibility in the Journey's End phase is if you're also on a wilderness tile that is empty or already under your control, you can build a mage tower at your mage location, which is permanent should you decide to build one. So the tower can't be moved or destroyed and it doesn't count towards endgame scoring. After building your tower, you can immediately place wards or initiate or promote an apprentice, which are possibilities 5 and 6. So number 5, you can put a ward of protection, which adds a layer of defense and therefore movement points that other players have to spend in order to attack your followers. You can place these wards on your current location and or on adjacent locations that you control and don't currently have a ward of protection. Special thanks to Mariano for correcting me there. You can do this if your mage ends on a wilderness tile, and you can also place wards right after building a mage tower. And the last possibility is initiating or promoting an apprentice. So if you end on a wilderness tile that has your mage tower on it, you can do the following in order. First, you can initiate an apprentice just like we talked about earlier, and then you can promote an apprentice if you have 2 apprentices in adjacent spheres of magic, which in terms of story, your apprentices are dueling each other and the winner goes to the elevated school of magic, while the loser is returned to your company. And then the same process goes for the most advanced school of magic. And that's the Journey's End phase. But now let's shift gears and finally talk about the whole point of a mage themed game, aka spellcasting. You can cast spells at any time during phase 2 or phase 3, which is really fun because that means you can spend movement points to travel and explore and attack, cast 1 or 2 spells, and then finish your movement points and cast more spells. And then even finishing your Journey's End phase and then cast spells again. So there are 3 levels of spell cards indicated on the top left symbol of their card and their color. Fundamental spells are in brown and cost 1 relic to cast. Advanced spells in blue cost 2 relics to use, and master spells in gold cost 3 relics to use. Since the advanced and master spells are hybrids, you can use either spheres of magic to use them. So let's say we want to use the Master Blood spell Obliterate. Since blood is in between nature and death, we can spend bones or death relics. We can use blood, or we can use seeds or nature relics to fulfill the cost completely. Since you can only cast each spell in your spellbook once per turn, move the card from below the spellbook to above the spellbook to mark which ones are used. Now on the top right of the spell card, aside from the type of relic, it also indicates spell timing. So the lightning symbol means it's resolved immediately as a one-time effect. The arrows mean they're temporary and they last until the start of the casting player's next turn. And the infinity symbol means the spell lasts for the whole game unless it's removed by conditions indicated on the card. So this type of spell constantly refreshes on the casting player's next turn. Some spells will also have you put a spell token like the Entangling Vine spell, but each location can only have 1 spell token. Now wards of protection don't count towards the limit, so you can have a ward and a spell token on the same location. Okay, that's how spell cards work. So the last phase we need to cover is phase 1, which is the preparation phase. So everyone uses their movement points in phase 2 and perform actions based on their location in phase 3. The reason we went over phase 2 first is because you actually skip phase 1 in the very first turn of the game. So why did I do that? Because in the preparation phase, you remove all your temporary spell tokens from the map, which you won't have in your first turn. See, isn't it easier to understand this way? You can't cast any spells in this phase here, but your spellbook is refreshed, meaning you bring back all your inactive spells from the top, back to the active spells on the bottom, and you also have to match your spells with the current apprentices. So if I have a nature spell with no nature apprentices, then I'm going to remove that from my spellbook, but I can still relearn those spells if I initiate an apprentice later on. And lastly, you can also move 1 planet of your choice towards the center and gain the corresponding relic. So if I move the purple planet towards number 3, then I gain 3 scrolls. Once planets are in the center, they can't be moved, and endgame is triggered once all the planets have aligned in the center. Now after all planets are in the middle, each player takes their final turn and casts all their spells, because once you start scoring, you can't cast spells anymore. This game's a little different, so each player has to take their final turn, and then you count up their final scores before moving on to another player. So first, you want to count up the number of spells in your spellbook. If in your final turn you initiated or promoted apprentices, then update your spellbook before you start counting. Each fundamental spell is worth 1 victory point, advanced spells are worth 2 points, and master spells are worth 4 victory points. If someone plays spells that affect endgame scoring, like the corrupt spell, which has you lose victory points, then subtract them afterwards. Second is control of the land. So for each wilderness location, not camps and not towns, you check to see if they have the most of that particular location. And if you do, you gain 2 points. If I tied with another player in the crypts, I gain 1 point. And if I have no libraries, then I gain no points for that location. After that, the most victory points wins. If there's a tie, it's determined in this following order. Tiebreaker is determined by most master spells first, and then the most advanced spells, followed by the most fundamental spells, then the most apprentices on the tire board, and the last tiebreaker, if it ever gets to that point, is the most followers on the map. As requested by Masdero, I'll go ahead and cover the solo rules too. The goal here is to defeat the warlord within 15 turns by mastering apprentices in 4 different spheres of magic, and by controlling the most tiles in at least 3 of the 5 different wilderness locations. Now tying with the warlord in this case does mean you get to claim the majority though. And here's a new 1-player setup with a new ring layout for 25 wilderness tiles, 4 towns, and 6 outposts. Your planets look like a 2-player game with 2 planets moved. You also take a set of fundamental and advanced spell cards that have the warlord icon on them, which means Torment replaces Decay, Befuddle replaces Shadow, Corrosion replaces Imprison, and Inflame replaces Fiery Chasm. Okay, side note, these things are pretty cool. I mean, come on. Fiery Chasm. No master cards are used in the solo play. So this is how solo play works. The warlord doesn't care for spells and instead focuses on territory control and fortification, and also has a massive army of 25 followers. To determine how he moves, note that this is the inner ring and this is the outer ring. He starts off first in the cursed tower and then he's going to move in the inner ring. Roll a die and let's say he gets a 2, meaning he's going to move northeast according to this warlord tile here, which shows the directions. So he moves in a straight line this way. So the first die determines which direction he's moving from the cursed tower, and in the case of the very first turn, it's going to be in the inner ring. The second die roll determines if he's going to move clockwise or counterclockwise. If the die is an odd number, it's counterclockwise, and if it's an even number, then he moves clockwise. So let's say the warlord rolls a 3, and since it's odd, he moves counterclockwise. Now he starts using up his 5 movement points. Anytime he goes into an unexplored location, he spends a point exploring it, and then deploys a follower. So in the first turn, he spends 1 point to explore the tile he's on and deploys a follower, a second point to move this way, a third point to explore the second tile, deploys another follower, and then moves again with his 4th point, explores it with his last movement point, and then again deploys another follower. And then it's your turn. Starting from the cursed tower, gameplay for phase 2 is the same, but you can't enter the location where the warlord is. And if you attack a warlord's follower, he gets them back to his company and he doesn't lose them to supply. And then we move on to the warlord's phase 3. If he ends on a wilderness location he controls, he places a ward of protection in the same way as regular gameplay, but since he can't use magic, the game recommends you use the shield icon. If he ends on any other location or on an unexplored location, nothing happens. From there, you take your phase 3, which is exactly the same, and you're interacting with specific locations. Then you move to phase 1, where you move spell tokens and effects and update your spellbook. And what's important here is that since you don't have any master spells in solo rules, you can still train a master apprentice, and instead they'll count for all of the advanced and fundamental spells in those schools of magic, even if other apprentices remain on the player board. So let's say I gain a master apprentice in will magic. I don't gain any master spells. However, I will have the ability to use the advanced spells between time and between will and death, along with the fundamental spell in will. Okay, so phase 1 preparations are over, and now take note of where the warlord ended in terms of which ring. So in the first turn, he ended in the inner ring. Now he moves back to the cursed tower for his journey phase. He rolls again, and let's say it's a 5 now, so he's moving towards the bottom left, but now it's in the outer ring. And then you roll again to see whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise. Last thing you know is if a warlord enters a location controlled by you, he will spend the movement points to remove a ward, if you have it, and attack your follower. If he moves through your mage or a mage tower, he can pass through it, but it doesn't attack or explore those areas. Now he spends all his movement points unless the last point causes him to stop on your location or on your mage tower. Okay, so endgame can be triggered before the 15 turns are up. Again, when you master 4 different spheres of magic and have a majority of the tiles in at least 3 types of locations. If you can't do this within 15 turns, you lose. One last thing is also an option for you to score a solo game to see how well you did each time. It's 5 points for every turn you didn't use below the 15 turn limit, 1 victory point for each fundamental spell that you learned, 2 for advanced spells, 4 points for each unique sphere of magic that has a master apprentice, and 2 points for each wilderness location where you own the majority, but 1 point if you're tied with the warlord. And that is Archmage version 2. Hopefully I'm not the only one that thinks this version 2 was a major step forward compared to my first video. Thanks for all the support and feedback I received in the past 2 months. I do listen. And if you haven't already, again, you should think about following my Instagram for more pictures and upcoming announcements for future tutorials. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next one.